Are you a satisfied citizen? This week, Kansas City, Missouri releases its annual Citizen Satisfaction Survey results, and apparently they're the highest ever. Kansas City leaders celebrated what they described as an historic upswing by getting city workers to form a human +5 on the lawn outside of City Hall, a symbol of the jump in approval ratings from last year. According to the new survey, more than 75% rate Kansas City a good or excellent place to live, the highest score ever recorded, they say. Big improvements were seen in leadership, water services, parks and recreation, and solid waste. But not everything was rosy. Sharp declines in satisfaction were recorded in citizens. We're asked about the ambulance service, public transportation, swimming pools, youth athletic programs, and illegal dumping in the city. But let's start with the positive, the highest satisfaction since this survey was started in 1997. Really, Lynn?
Well, actually, the city has done these surveys for years. They haven't always had the same company or the same methodology. And I think with the current company that they're using, it's the highest ever. I found another survey back in 1997 when they had a different survey and a different methodology that also showed 75% approval rating. So whether this is a record or not, I don't think so. But it was good news for the political leaders. Now, I will say, it's one thing to rate your city as a good place to live. It's another to say, yes, the city government services are highly rated. And many of the city government services still don't get very good ratings, but they're better than they were a few years ago when they were absolutely in the basement. And also, Kansas City is edging up slightly with citizens, whereas many other cities are sort of stagnant. Their poll results are not improving. Kansas City, compared to its peer cities and other large cities, still is a little bit below average, but it is doing better than it has in recent years.
Again, sticking to the positive, though, where they've got, again, these employees forming the human +5 on the lawn outside of City Hall. What could somehow be attributed to that shift then, what they're calling an historic shift in that short period of time?
Well, I think partly the economy is a little bit better than it has been in recent years, and we don't have quite the dysfunctional city government that we had during the Funkhauser.
Yes, because leadership was considered one of the positives.
Oh, and several years ago, only 1/5 of the citizens said we had a good city leadership. Now, about half people think the city government is pretty good, so the city leadership.
Well, as someone who's moved here since that survey they're going back to, I think, 2005 or 2008, I'm going to argue that 75% satisfaction rate, or saying that Kansas City is a good place to live, is because of the art and the culture and the food and the people. I'm not going to give the city the credit and say it's as a result of City Hall and the management and the services that they provide, because I think the numbers show otherwise. Look, 25% rating for maintenance of streets, sidewalk, and infrastructure. Looking at value of tax dollars received, 35%. Level of public involvement in decision-making, 27%. I could go on. Those numbers are abysmal. And when you look at also, they give about 4,000 people who responded. Look where the majority of those people are coming from. The majority come from a pocket of two areas, north of the river and west of Troost. And even those folks aren't necessarily giving good numbers. In fact, they're giving negative numbers for services received by the city. So I think it's a result of Kansas City, what it offers in terms of entertainment, food, and just a place to live, and not necessarily City Hall at all.
Eric?
I agree, and a lot of times it's where those surveys are taken. Now, what I will say positively is we don't have as many people calling us at the call. I don't have to call the city manager and have tires removed from neighborhoods. But again, you get into the core things of how are people responding. If you drive out Troost, it seems like the bottom of your car is going to fall out. The potholes, the way the street is structured. Now, we keep getting all these taxes for road improvements, where they're improving the roads from. And I think he said it's like 25% of the people, and I don't know where those 25% are driving. But I think that there are improvements, but again, it could be, you could say it was management, because they are focused on specific areas and they're targeting those areas and they're making improvements. Trash pickup is a little bit better. You don't have the tires. In the urban core, you had tires all over the place. Now that's a lot cleaner.
Dave?
Yeah, a couple of worrisome things. I hate to be Debbie Downer on all of this, but there are a few worrisome things from these results. One of them is they're roughly the same that they've been all the. I mean, there's not that much fluctuation in citizen satisfaction if you look at categories. And typically in Kansas City, citizens are very satisfied with services that they don't use very much. They're very happy with the fire department. It's possible you could go your whole life in Kansas City and never have a fire in your home. Happy with the police department. You probably don't interface with them a lot. But the services you use every day, like driving the streets, or maybe going to the pool, or other, trash removal, those are much lower rated services. And so that suggests that the city still has a lot of work to do in improving the ways that citizens experience their community every day, and not once in a while as it would be with the other. The other thing I would note is the airport is very high, which again, a lot of people would never use. If you're thinking about trying to convince voters to expand the airport, when 25% are satisfied with street repair and sidewalk repair, I know they're not supposed to be connected, but I'm telling you, in the minds of Kansas Cityans, they are. And anyone who wants to expand the airport has a real uphill battle.
By the way, we are doing a special on the future of KCI, an hour-long special on this program next week here on KCPT, right here on this time frame. So please stay tuned for that. Eric?
Had a lady that I spoke with this morning call 911 4 times to report a burglary, and took the police 45 minutes to get there. She said the helicopter got there faster than the police cars, and this was like on the edge of Kansas City.
All right.